Hello everyone. In this video we're going to look at the modeling of a slider crank mechanism. Now I'm going to do this one slightly different to the one that I did in class, but just because I want to show you creating a number of different sketches in the layout. Now here we have a blank design file. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save it. So it's going into my mechanisms folder, slider crank video. And the very first thing that I'm going to do is create a new component, and I'm going to call this layout. I always call it a layout. You can call it whatever makes sense for you. Okay, it's just a place where you put your top level sketches. So again, we're using the top level design. Okay, sorry, top down design approach. So all that simply means is we're doing some high level sketches, and that high level information is going to filter down into the parts. Okay, so let's get started. So within here, we're in the layout. We've created our assembly. We've created a part within there called layout. Now, just be aware of what part you're in, okay? Because even I get it wrong. I get it, you know, I find I'm in the wrong part and I have to delete sketches or features. So just always be aware. So I'm going to go to the front view. And the first thing that we're going to do is I'm just going to block out my slider crank mechanism. Okay, so I'm going to make this one 45. I'm going to make this 100. I'm then going to have, so this is my turning. This is the crank. This is the link. And then here we have the slider. Okay, so I'm going to make the slider 50 by 25. Okay, now let's add some constraints to this. So I'm going to add those two endpoints together. I'm going to put this endpoint in the middle there, just because that's where I want to put it. You can decide where you need this to be. Okay, now actually what we need to think about is this is going to be a link. And this is going to be the endpoint where the hole is going to be. So the hole doesn't want to be on the edge of the part. So let's redo that. Okay, so let's put in another little line on the midpoint. So if I hover over the line, I can see the midpoint triangle come up. Let's sketch a line in, put that in about 7. Okay. Click on the line, make it construction. Excuse me. And then I can add in the coincident constraint between this endpoint and the endpoint of the line there. Okay, now just because this is my design, I'm going to make this horizontal. This point here is going to be horizontal to the origin. Now you can, if you so wish, create a slider crank that has an offset on it of whatever you need. Okay, so we've locked down the joints, the link lengths. This is my ground here. This is link 1, link 2, and here we have our slider. We have constrained our slider, so we can't move it up and down because of this dimension here. And it's connected to this link with a known dimension here. So now our slider crank mechanism should start to work. So if I drag the sketch around, you can see the mechanism working. Okay. So let's take this as the mechanism. Okay, I'm going to stick with the 15 actually, just for now. Okay, so we've given it a height and a width. Now this would probably fully constrain for me if I added in one more dimension, which is that one. Okay, so everything is fully constrained. It's one way to check, right, to see have you got everything constrained. Yes, so let's delete that. Okay, now the other way would be, let's say if I popped in a dimension between, I don't know, let's see which plane, that one and there. If I put in an angle, okay, and I could just simply keep changing that angle to give me different locations on the mechanism. Okay, so I can see everything is fully constrained here. I don't want this dimension just now. You can leave it in. We've verified that the mechanism works. And then, you know, we're going to see it in action. So it could be a good thing to put in this dimension, put in this angle, just to keep everything locked down. But one of the things that we want to check is that when we move this, that the whole mechanism moves with it. So we'll take a look at the various ways of doing that. So that's my sketch. Okay. You can get into renaming these. Okay. And it's entirely up to you. Okay. Sometimes it's handy to keep them renamed a little bit. It just keeps your information a bit tidier. So we've got our layout. Now let's start drawing in the links. Okay, so I'm out of that sketch. I've finished this one. Let's keep this simple. Let's do another sketch. Let's click on here and we're going to use this link. Okay, so I am going to pull in, you can press P. See the project tool? If I press P on the keyboard, it brings it up. I have a little shortcut menu. I get that by pressing S on the keyboard. Okay, it brings up my shortcut menu and you can add in different ones. If I wanted the project tool, I'd find it here and there'd be, if I delete it and then hover over it, it's not there. So if I click on this little arrow, it'll pop it up there. There we go. And that remembers your settings. Okay, so there's two ways of doing this. If I click on this line, it brings in that line as a solid entity. Okay, now we can go into our preferences and we can change under, if I can find it, I think there is a project, maybe they've moved, maybe it's gone, so as whenever you project it in an edge, it would bring it in as a construction, but maybe they've moved that. Maybe that's gone. So there was an option to turn it just to construction line. Well, let's say we create our geometry. I'm just gonna pop this in really quickly for now and not constrain it up too madly, just because I want to show you. So now I can hover over and see the profiles. So the projection into that line, don't forget that it now splits these profiles into two. Okay, so sometimes that can be an issue. You just have to bear in mind that this is what's going to happen. The other way of doing that is if I project in the endpoints. So if I project in that point and that point and click OK, then hide this sketch and you can see all I've got now is the endpoints. So now if I go to create my circles, let's make this one at say 20 and let's make this one at 10. This is going to be my hole for all of my joints. And then we can add in some of the lines. We're going to move it around till the tangent constraint snaps on, and we can do that on those lines. Then we've got to just manually do the start points. Okay, so this is all fully constrained. And now when I hover over it, you see I got one complete profile. It's just either or is correct. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. It's just if you use the line, just be aware that you're going to have to select both sides of the profile. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. That's one component in the sketch. Let's click OK. Now, is there anything wrong with me doing this sketch in here in the layout, or if I create a new component and call this crank, doing the sketch in the crank? No, this sketch 2 could easily have been done in the crank part and just referencing back to this sketch here, this mech layout sketch. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way, this is just the way that I'm choosing to do it. Okay, I'm choosing to have all these sketches in one part just because that's the way that I want to do it. Okay, it's possible that I'm going to reuse this geometry across a number of different parts. So I tend to try and put it in the layout. Okay, just because that's the way that I like to do it. If I create a crank and I add some geometry in, I can share that geometry from the crank to other parts, to the levers, to the links, sorry. There's nothing stopping me doing that, okay? But you just have to try and keep track of all these relationships and what sketch is related to what sketch. That's why I put everything in the layout. So if I think this sketch is going to be useful to a number, to one or two or more parts, I will put it in this layout. Then I know where all the driving sketches are. Okay, so it's entirely up to you what way you want to do it. Just bear in mind that you have to keep track of your information. So let's go for sketch. Let's do the other link. Okay, so let's do this link. This link should be quite straightforward. I'm just going to do that as a slot, a center to center. I forgot to project in. So I'm going to project the ends again. This is just the way that I like to do it. Entirely up to you, whatever way you want to do it. Okay. And I'm going to make that 10, I think. And then I'm just going to put holes on the end. Now, in this video, I'm not covering adding in the bearings and doing the design for encapsulating bearings and how they work. That's a different video altogether, okay? So, oops, there we go. Look, see? So I've just created that sketch and it's not in the layout, okay? So I wasn't paying attention. I put that in the wrong place. So now I'm going to delete that because I don't want it in there. I want to keep everything nice and tidy. So I'm going to do click on my layout, turn that on again, create a new sketch on here. And it's no problem. You saw how quick and easy it was to do. Click OK. Let's turn off that sketch, pop in my slot again. Make that 10. And let's pop in the holes on either end. Generally, they are not needed at this level, okay, because we're just doing a design, a quick analysis, but I just, you know, for completeness, I'm just putting them in. Okay, so there's our crank, there's our link. Again, you can rename these. It does get handy when your models get big and it takes only seconds to do it. Okay, and then let's hide those off. We're still in the layout that's active. Click on a new sketch, turn on the mech layout, and this one is going to be the slider. Okay, so actually I don't even need to do a sketch for that one. The only thing that I need to do is to add in a hole for it, and I can probably do that in the part level, okay, because that's information that I can share from the link. Okay, from the link sketch. So in actual fact, I don't think I need a slider sketch at the minute. Okay, what I do need though, and let's have a look at it, is a base. Okay, so I need a hole here, and let's make that 5. And then I've got to have some kind of bracket, so I need something to mount this on. Okay, and then I need to come down and I need to provide a base for this to slide on. And I'm not sure how far I need to go with it just yet. So, oops, apologies. Hey, lost where I was there. Sometimes these models rotate and you forget what orientation you're looking at, and the 2D sketch makes it confusing. So I'm gonna go by here and just going to drag down an inferred straight line from there, go up to there. Okay, so this is kind of my base. That did not come out horizontal. Pop that in as horizontal, and let's do some dimensioning now. Okay, so let's make that 5, oops, not 57, 5. Let's make that 5. We don't really have to worry about strength because this is just a preliminary design. Let's go and do, so I'm not going to put a dimension down to here. I'm going to let the slider drive this stuff. So from the slider, I'm going to go up 10. And then from the bottom of the slider, I'm going to go down, let's say 10. Okay. And I want a little ledge for the slider to go on. And I want it to have a stop, so I'm going to create like a little ledge like this. Okay, and I don't seem to be able to draw straight lines today. Okay, now it's snapped to the midpoint. I don't want that. Let's move that out of the way. And what I wanted to do is just make it collinear with that line there. Okay, and then we'll leave that free for now. And we will move the mechanism until its minimum value, and then we'll update that. Okay, so that's probably everything that I need for the moment. Let's rename that sketch as base. Okay, and there we go. So now we have everything. So now we are ready to go. So let's go back, activate our assembly. Let's pull in that part, this crank, and now I'm ready to start extruding. Okay, so I just pull out these sketches so as I can see them all. And let's just turn off that, turn off the base, turn off the link. Now let's get going. So we are in the crank. Let's activate that. Let's click on extrude, and I want that one, and that one. Okay. Now, I don't know the directions. I don't know where things are going to lie in this axis. So I'm just going to start extruding things. Okay. And just for clarity, let's create some, duplicate that. Let's edit it, and let's make this slightly that color. Okay. Alright, just so as we can clearly see different components, so as we can see the mechanism, the procedure in place. That's enough for the crank. New component, link. Okay, turn off the crank, turn on the link. Let's just hide off the crank component. So as we're seeing only what we need, let's just go that way by 5 mil. For now, we can adjust all this. Okay, so if we turn on our link, let's duplicate that, edit, and make it an orangey. Okay, now let's do the slider. So once we've got all the information, we're kind of ready to go. So let's remove that. Once we got all the information, it's very straightforward. I've forgotten the orientation here. Let's go, yeah, okay, let's go that way. So let's go back this way. Let's do that -10, just to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, let's duplicate that, edit that one. Let's make that a little green color. Okay, and now we can, new component, base. And let's turn off the mech layout, turn on the base. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do then is just extrude this, and let's have a look, where are we? So the base is probably going to go that way. That way, and I think that's probably fine actually. So we probably don't even need this. We'll just, for now, for the purposes of our design, I will just rearrange where that is, where this slider is. So let's make that 15. Okay, and now we can activate the assembly. Let's duplicate that, edit that. Let's make the base a little darker, sorry, a little yellower. Okay, and we can turn off that sketch. So we want this going in the other direction. So let's click on that extrusion. So once I click on it, I can see it down in the design history, down here. Okay. So sorry, where was it again? This one. So that's the component creating the slider, and that's the extrusion. So if I right click on that, edit that feature, we want to go in the other direction. So let's just go +10, and then we want it starting at that face. So on profile plane, let's go to object and just say start here. Okay, so even though we sketched it on here, we're saying start there. And that's quite powerful to be able to do that. And we're going to use that a lot when you're doing mechanisms, and especially when you're doing this top-down design approach. Now, technically, we don't to set this up, we don't need a hole in this slider, but let's do it anyway. So we've got our slider component there, but ahead of it we've got in the time, in the order that we've done it in, we've got the base and then the base extrusion. I like to keep everything together as much as possible, so I'm going to grab this and just step it back. The other way of doing that, if this grab doesn't work, sometimes it's a little finicky, just use this stepping control. Don't use that one because that goes all the way back to the start, and this one goes all the way to the end. You can just step back through it by using this button. Okay, so there we can see we're at the slider and the base is gone. Okay, so for this, let's turn off the crank and the link, activate the slider, turn on the link sketch. Okay, we don't need any new sketch. Then just select that profile, drag it out, distances through all, click OK. There we go, done. Turn off these sketches. We'll leave the view of the layout on, turn the other components on, activate the assembly again and go all the way to the end. Okay, so there we go. Okay, now we could do the same here, but I want to show you that we don't actually need that little hole in there. Okay, so let's save this now. Now, it's very important to remember that even though I've created these parts, I haven't locked them down. All right, so if I try and drag them, they just fly off into space. Okay, but they are all dependent on this sketch and these sketches. So you can see now that I can capture this position and I can say, oh, this is where I want them to be. And if I click that, you see that little feature pop in there. Okay, but if I step back and remove that, everything snaps back to the sketch. Okay, pop that little capture position in and there we have it. Okay, generally we don't use that. Okay, so if you pop one in by accident, just delete it off. Sometimes it happens. I just want to try and show you. Sometimes it happens, and I think it happened to me the other day. And you're looking at a sketch and you're trying to regenerate the model by going forward and backwards, and you see this small difference and you're not really sure where it came out of. You probably have possibly saved, captured a position and you just didn't know it. So just take your time, go through the timeline and just look for this. Delete that and then everything should snap back to where it was. Now the mechanism doesn't work. If I try and drag this, it doesn't work. It just moves the part. Click this to revert the position. Because I haven't added any joints yet. Okay. Now the first thing that I probably want to do is lock down what's grounded. So this base is what's going to be grounded. So if I click on the base and highlight it, and I right click on it and I go ground, see a little pin comes on it. And now if I left click and hold on this, it does not go anywhere. I can't move it. Excuse me. And now we're ready to use the joint constraints called as built. So this joint moves things from a position. Okay, and if I captured that, let's say this was a component that I moved in, I can use this to say pop this circle onto that one. Okay, and I can provide motion to it as well. I could give it a revolute joint also. We can have a look at that working. Okay, but that is not what I want. This is not what we're trying to achieve. Okay, we need to use what's called an as-built joint. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that capture. And I'm going to go back and forward. Okay, so what we need to do is use an as-built joint because everything is in the position that we want it to be in. Now at this stage, don't forget, if I go into this, if I hide off all the other sketches and I show the dimensions for this mechanism sketch, so just right click and go show dimensions. Okay, then everything is related to the sketch, so as I can get this slightly working. Okay. So I can modify this dimension and have a look at it and see. I didn't think it would let me do that. If I want to go the opposite direction, I think I've just got to, oops, sorry. I got to go into that sketch and change it. Okay, so let's see. finish that. So I think I gotta go into not sure what's happening there. Doesn't allow me, doesn't seem to want to let me into that sketch for some reason. Let's activate our assembly and we'll carry on anyway. So I can do it in the sketch, okay? I can change the, here we go. So I can delete off that. I can drag this in the opposite direction and say, right, that's probably the max of the travel of the slider. Click OK, and I can see we've got a little interference there. And then I could go into my base and we could drag that out, pop a dimension on it. Click OK. Okay, now we can see I'm getting some errors there with regard to the actual sketch itself. Okay, so probably dragging it like this has created some new profiles and cut profiles in half. So let's take a look. Some things have overlapped on other things. So it doesn't like doing that. Even though you can do it, just be aware that there's some limitations as you just saw. I'm just control Zing here until I get everything into a nice place. I know the dimension for that. I just popped it in there. It's 45. So let's just do that while we're here. So 45 will get us into roughly the right spot. Okay, so we've grounded our component. Now let's go adding the joints. So let's hide off that sketch. And then we can go in as built. Now as built joint is a little different. All I got to do is select the two components. It doesn't matter the order, that one and that one. And then just say I want it to be a revolute joint between the two of them. And what axes am I going to use? So I don't have any holes here. Well, I do have in this part, but I don't really need to select it. I can select that edge. Click on check that and I can see this is the correct this is the correct direction, the correct axes. Click OK, and now I can see this part moving. Okay, now I've moved it, so if we just click revert, it'll switch back to where it was, because again it's taken everything from this sketch. Okay, now let's keep going. As built between this component and this component, it's a revolute joint and it's going to be on that circle there. Let's check that out. That's good. Let's keep going. As built between this component and this component, revolute around that axis. Let's just double check that. Click OK. And then the last one, as built, this time it's a slider between that component and that component because I want this to slide on there. Now you might be tempted to click an edge. When you do, it will select it, but it will not complete this slider. Instead, you just need to click a surface. Okay, so I'm going to click the midpoint of this surface. And now you can see I get up all the options for a slider and I can click OK. Now I think this wants to be the X axis. If you don't know, you can always just select an axis and click on check. Okay, that looks okay. Click OK. Now we've got joints for everything. So let's give this a go. And there we go. We can see our slider crank moving. This is a lot more stable than doing it sketch wise because we're moving the parts, not the sketch geometry. So any profiles are not overlapping. So we can see we've got a very obvious problem with our mechanism. This is going through there. So for this one, I would probably want to put this on that side. So let's do that now. So let's go into our link. Let's change our feature. And instead of going that direction, we want to go in the other direction. And then we want to start it on that surface there. Okay. So now we can click here and we can see all our parts have updated. Okay. Now, because we moved this, the start face here, which was there, has flipped and this is now starting there. So we just need to update this one. So before I activated the part, I activated the link and went into it, but you don't need to do that. You just need to select on it, see it in the timeline, edit the feature, and then say, instead of starting on that surface, start on this surface. There we go. Click OK. Now it's overhanging a little bit. And if we were going to work on the design a little bit more, obviously I might recess in for this crank, and I'd be adding bearings. There'd be a whole lot more work to do. But for just this example, there's our slider crank. We have now no interferences, so we can carry on. So that is the slider crank design. If I revert the position, I get back to the start. Okay, so that's the top-down method doing a mechanism. You can see it's all pretty neat and tidy. The parts themselves are quite simple, but you know, if you're going detailed design on this, I would try and keep the layout simple and share geometry. But then if you're doing holes then to take bearings and screws and threads or nuts and threaded inserts, then I would probably model most of that stuff at the part level. So go into your crank and then start sketching and modeling in there. Just be aware of what you've got active, what you're sketching in, what you're creating features in. For most of this stuff, what we're doing is pretty basic. So, you know, if you make a mistake, just delete it off and you can always go back in. Okay, that's it for now.